Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress. Less than 4 weeks now till the World Championship match between Carlsen and Caruana will start on November 9th in London. Only 27 days to wait. On Chess to Impress we continue the build-up, the countdown towards that great event which is the 47th match in the history of the undisputed and official world title. On Chess to Impress we're looking at the first 46 events, building up to the Carlsen-Caruana match. We are in the Karpov-Kasparov era. They played 5 matches against each other in the space of 6 years, and this video is about the second match, played in 1985. The first match, which started in September 84, was stopped by the president of the World Chess Federation, Florencio Campomanes, after 48 games because of health reasons for the players. Both players wanted to play on, but Campomanes stopped the match. Karpov wanted to play on because he was 5-3 ahead. Kasparov wanted to play on because he had just won game 47 and 48 to reduce his deficit from 5-1 to 5-3. A new match was announced, and it was no longer the first player to win 6 games. There was a maximum of 24 games, so the match was no longer unlimited. If Karpov lost the world title, he would be entitled to a rematch. And the match was depicted as a clash of ideologies between the new Russia with glasnost and perestroika, represented by Kasparov and Mikhail Gorbachev, and the old Russia, represented by Karpov and the communist regime. Here's a picture of the match, both players shaking hands before the start of a game. Kasparov took an early lead by winning the first game. Karpov hit back with wins in game 4 and 5. Karpov made a terrible blunder in game 11, which equalized the match. Then was game 16, the famous game where Kasparov destroyed Karpov with black with an octopus, a knight on d3. He also won game 19 to take a 2-point lead, but Karpov came back in game 22. So before the last game the score was 12 to Kasparov, 11 to Karpov, and Karpov had to win the last game to make it 12-all and thus retain the world title. So Karpov had to win the last game, which was played on the 9th of November 1985, and I will show you this game. I'm taking the comments from Garry Kasparov himself from the book he wrote about the match, and let me start with a quote. Of course, Karpov's task before the 24th game was complicated. Only a win was any good to him, and from the experience of chess events it is known that playing for a win to order in the last game almost always proves unsuccessful. However, in such cases, the theory of probability is unconvincing. There is always the risk of being the exception that proves the rule. Determining the strategy for the decisive encounter was a serious problem for me. It is well known that direct play for a draw is fraught with great danger, and in addition, it in no way corresponds with my outlook on chess. Therefore, casting all hesitation aside, I decided not to avoid critical continuations, but to accept an open battle. So let's have a look at this game. Karpov white, Kasparov black. The world champion opened with e4, which was a slight surprise, because in the previous 71 games for the world championship, Karpov had beaten Kasparov only once with e4, and 5 times with d4. Kasparov chose the Sicilian, knight f3, and e6 was played in game 12 and 16. Game 16, that famous game where Kasparov crushed his opponent with black. But he chose d6 for this crucial game. d4, c takes, knight f6, knight c3, a6, the Najdorf variation, bishop e2, and with e6 we're going into the Scheveningen variation of the Sicilian. Karpov castled, bishop e7, f4. It was not the first time these moves were played in this match. Kasparov castled, king steps aside, queen c7, a4, knight c6, bishop e3 and rook e8. Here bishop g1 was tried by Karpov in game 10 of this match, but it did not give him any advantage, so he went for bishop f3 instead. Rook b8, queen d2, rook e1 was played in game 5 of the first match in this position, but Karpov played queen d2 here, bishop d7, knight b3, b6, and now g4. While bishop f2 was played in game 18 of this match. g4 was a new move. It was played by the Russian Grandmaster Andrei Sokolov against Zoltan Ribli in the Candidates Tournament for the next World Championship cycle in Montpellier in France, only a few days before this game. And both the Karpov and Kasparov camp must have scrutinized the Montpellier games for anything that they could use in this match. And g4 was something that Karpov liked for this game. He's attacking Black's king. Bishop c8 and g5. The knight dropped back to d7. Queen f2. Karpov is going to point his pieces at Black's king. Bishop f8. Kasparov is setting up a defensive system. Bishop g2 and bishop b7. As Kasparov writes in his book, Black avoids the traditional but slow plan of transferring the knight through a5 to c4 and create counterplay on the queen side. He simply completes his development, counting on the flexibility and soundness of his position, and he plans to meet White's attack in the future with f5, writes Kasparov himself. Karpov plays rook a d1. He wants to bring this rook to the king side, as we'll see. g6. Bishop c1 played after 44 minutes of thought. Karpov has now cleared the third rank and is going to regroup that rook from d1 to the king side. Knight b4 could have prevented White's rook maneuver, but Kasparov has other ideas. He played rook b to c8. Rook d3 is planned. Now knight b4, even helping the rook to go to h3, and that's where the rook went. Bishop g7. These pieces now look very nice for Black. And bishop e3 was played by Karpov. Not hurrying, but slowly strengthening his position, as Kasparov writes. A direct attack with queen h4 does not work. Knight f8, and White's attack is not strong enough yet. So Karpov keeps building with bishop e3. Rook e7, a multifunctional rook move, protecting f7, maybe later protecting h7 as well. It's important to see here that winning material with bishop takes c3 does not work. B takes, queen takes, because then bishop d4, and yes, you can take another pawn, but then there is rook takes h7, and White has a winning mating attack. So rook e7 was played by Kasparov. King g1 after 30 minutes of thought. A mysterious move explained by Kasparov as a prophylactic move in the category just in case, inviting Black to declare his intentions. And Kasparov played this move, rook c to e8. What is that? Doubling the rooks on a closed file. The heavy artillery on the e-file discourages White to attack with f5. That's the idea of doubling those rooks there. It looks weird to double the rooks, but as Kasparov writes, it has a sound positional basis. Rook d1 from Karpov, and Kasparov plays f5 himself. Karpov took en passant. Knight takes. Kasparov is not bothered about losing this pawn, which is now hanging. He has all his minor pieces attacking, and White has lots of weak points in his camp. c2, c3, e4 and f4 are targets for Black. Karpov played rook g3. He can make a draw here, but that's of no use to him. He could have taken the pawn on b6, attacking the queen, queen b8, and then bishop a7, queen c7. You have to keep protecting the d6 pawn, and that's how White can make a draw. But a draw was no good to him. He had to win. So Karpov played rook g3. Rook f7, and now Karpov took on b6, taking a pawn. Queen b8, and bishop back to e3. Kasparov writes, White's weakened king side is now a cause of constant concern for him. Black has compensation for the pawn. Kasparov played knight h5, attacking the rook, rook g4, and knight back to f6. And again, Karpov can make a draw with rook g3. But now he has to force things to keep the game going. He played rook h4 instead. g5, very nice move, giving up a second pawn, at least temporarily, to activate his pieces. Karpov took, and now another great move from Kasparov. Knight takes e4, taking a pawn, is very unclear according to Kasparov in his book, and he played knight g4. He said it's more important to eliminate the dark squared bishop than taking the e-pawn. Queen d2, saving the queen, and there goes the dark squared bishop off the board. Queen takes back, and knight takes c2, winning a pawn back. You have to stay on the diagonal. Queen b6 is the only square on the diagonal that you can go to. If you move, for example, to h3, then there's queen a7 check, king h1, and queen b6. Attacking the knight on b3. The plan is to play knight e3 next, and black is better. So Karpov stays on the diagonal, and now bishop a8. Another great move from Kasparov. The lack of harmony in the placement of the white pieces begins to tell, writes Kasparov. And he's not worried about the queen swap. The queens are swapped. Then white is a pawn up, but all his pawns are weak. This is not a winning attempt for white. So what to do after bishop a8? Karpov took on d6. As a desperate measure, he chooses variation where he gets 3 pawns for a piece. Because he's going to lose a piece now. Because this rook comes to b7 and it's skewering queen and knight. Karpov takes on a6. There goes the piece. Rook takes e6 and rook takes b2. This is move 38 because Karpov's flag is about to fall. Kasparov still has 10 minutes for the last 2 moves. Kasparov writes, formally white has enough material for the piece, but in this type of position the piece is of an incomparably greater value. In addition, the black pieces are better prepared for an attack on the enemy king. White's king is also less safe than black's king. Queen c4 played by Karpov, threatening a nasty discovered check with the rook. So Kasparov tucks his king in the corner. And now the best way to play is rook takes e8 check. Queen takes and knight d1. Kasparov thinks that black is still winning here. The engine I use thinks that white should be able to hold this. It doesn't really matter. Because after king h8, Karpov did not take on e8. He played a blunder. e5 is a blunder on the 40th move. And now black is winning. Queen a7 check. King h1. Kasparov took on g2, king takes back, and the last move of the game, the last move of 72 games to figure out the winner of this match was knight d4 check, winning a full rook. It's check, and this rook is now just hanging. You can still go wrong with black if you're not careful. Rook takes e6 instead would have been a big blunder, because then Karpov would have remained world champion. After queen c8 check, it's black who gets mated. All black can do is interpose the pieces and checkmate. Knight e4 check was a winning move. Karpov resigned, and Kasparov writes, the thunderous roar which broke out at that moment finally convinced me. Yes, yes, it was true. I had done it. What a dramatic game, what a dramatic end to this match. Kasparov won the match 13-11 and was now the official and undisputed 13th world champion. As mentioned, Karpov was entitled to a rematch, so only 1 year later both players were at it again for the 3rd match, and that's what we'll talk about in the next video. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. If you like the video, if you like this series, please share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. The link to the series is here, and this is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.